Hello and welcome in to another episode of the Fantasy Football Forecast. I'm your host, Trevor Scott, joined by my co-host, Matt Duraldi, and special guest, Caleb Niemi.
What up, guys? Super excited to be here on the show and just excited to be talking some rookies. We got the combine coming up, free agency, a lot of coaching changes, so a lot of good stuff to dive into tonight.
Yeah, and Caleb, take a second and tell us about your channel a little bit. So you are a content creator. You're bigger than us here at the Fantasy Football Forecast. So I'm not sure that we can help you with subscribers, but tell us a little bit about your channel, how you got started. Just a little bit about your story.
No, for sure. And we all start somewhere, and I think you guys have been making really great content, so I want you guys to keep it up. But yeah, my name's Caleb Niemi. I have my own fantasy football channel at Caleb Niemi. I post redraft and dynasty content all year round. So if you like the same things that we're going to be talking about tonight, make sure you come over and check me out.
All right, good deal. So we're going to be doing a 1-round, 12-team Superflex mock draft. We obviously preach the 3 wide receiver lens. So wide receivers, I think, are going to get pushed up a little bit in this draft. And we're going to use landing spots from the most recent Pro Football Network mock draft. So that's going to play in quite a bit to this first round because there's a couple notable players that got left out. So let's take a look at the draft board here. And with the first pick, and again, these picks are all made by Caleb. So we're going to tee it up for him, and then we'll discuss each player as we go through landing spots. And then at the end, we'll talk about who missed this first round. So starting at 101, again, no surprise here, unfortunately, right? We just got Ashton Jeanty. That's going to be pretty much the 101 across the board for all formats.
Yeah, and in this mock draft, Ashton Jeanty went, of course, round 1, pick 10 to the Chicago Bears, which I thought was a super interesting landing spot. We're joining with Ben Johnson now being the head coach, jumping from Detroit Lions with Jahmyr Gibbs to now getting Ashton Jeanty according to this mock draft. Made me super excited for Ashton Jeanty. We love any round 1 running back that gets drafted, but especially in this class when maybe we have a few more question marks around the overall depth of the class. We do know that, of course, the quarterback situation, depending on who you talk to, there's various opinions right now in the space. But I just feel like Ashton Jeanty at this point in the offseason with this top 10 draft capital, give me him at the 110.
I hadn't seen him mock to the Bears at all. And when I first saw this, I was kind of excited and intrigued because we know they have Swift. We know that Swift was in the Lions system before, but he's just so weird as a running back. He's awful, then he's great, and then he's awful again. But I think with Jeanty, this makes a lot of sense because they definitely want to take a lot of pressure off Caleb Williams. Obviously, upgrading the O-line is going to be priority number 1. But if they can get that running game established, I think that'll open up a lot more for him.
Yeah, remember when Swift was a top 7 or 8 running back for that random stretch from week 4 to week 8 this past year, and then he fell completely out of favor again to a borderline droppable player. That's obviously super weird. But if Jeanty does get this capital and goes to the Bears, obviously in Ben Johnson's system, he wants to run. They really focused in Detroit on the run game, and if he comes in and immediately takes a running back like this, obviously that's going to continue to be the focus for his offenses. So I'm not as stoked on this landing spot as maybe I am with the Cowboys, but this is one of the better spots because he's not going to concede any work to DeAndre Swift if this is going to be his draft capital and landing spot. So I like Jeanty here. Definitely like him here more than Houston, which is where he landed in our first mock draft. Mixon definitely presents a much larger barrier than Swift would. Getting into the 102, we've got Tet McMillan going to Jacksonville at the 105.
Yeah, I think for Tet, I would have ideally liked to see him land at 4 to the Patriots. I think we could have talked a little bit more about, the no target competition to really just be him and Pop Douglas. But looking at him landing with the Jacksonville Jaguars, one of my favorite players to buy heading into this offseason has been Brian Thomas Jr. So if this were to happen, probably not as stoked for all my Brian Thomas Jr. shares, but also not super stoked for Tet because, like we said, we haven't seen Trevor Lawrence be able to support 2 receiving options in this offense to be elite level wide receiver options. So I said all that, but yet I'm still excited about Tet as a prospect. Super tall. A lot of people are comparing him to a guy like a Mike Evans, and his jump ball ability is really where I think he's going to win in the NFL. So like I said, getting this top 5 draft capital as a wide receiver, especially in this class where the depth at wide receiver isn't what we saw last year. We don't have the Marvin Harrison Jr.'s, the Neighbors, even like the Romo Dunze type prospect. I think Tet probably slides in more similar to where Rome was for me last year if we were to pair the 2024 and the 2025 rookie classes together. But saying all of that, looking at how this draft fell, I'll take Tet McMillan here at the 102.
Yeah, And it's interesting too with Liam Coen there now as well. And you've talked about, Mike Evans being a comp, and it's like, we saw how he and Godwin feasted in that system. And it's like, I don't think Lawrence is necessarily playing at Baker's level right now. But I still think he can be a solid, middle of the road quarterback. So this one's interesting, and I kind of like it, but you're right. If it was the Patriots, then we would be talking about a clear cut number one at this point.
Yeah, and if you watch the channel, you know that we don't like Trevor Lawrence, specifically me. I don't like Trevor Lawrence. So seeing this landing spot, I was like, oh, please. I would rather him go to Carolina, honestly, than to Jacksonville. And the other thing you said about going to New England, you said he's, going to be number one and it's Pop Douglas, but don't sleep on Quinshon Judkins. We like Quinshon Judkins on this
my guy
on this channel quite a bit, right? Matt was calling him out. He had a pretty good finish to the year there in New England, so no, he would obviously be the clear cut there. But they do have a couple complementary weapons that I think would open up quite a bit if they did get Tet. So I'm kind of rooting for him to go there. We're going to talk about the receiver that / cornerback that the Patriots did draft in this mock a little bit later down the board. But I do obviously like Tet McMillan. I think he's going to be a red zone threat from day one, no matter where he goes. So maybe that caps Brian Thomas Jr.'s touchdowns a little bit, but overall, I think he would help this offense quite a bit.
I don't think anything caps BTJ's touchdowns. He had 17 with Malik Neighbors on the same field.
Yeah, I mean, in college, and he had 10 last year, and I swear 8 of them were from outside of 50 yards, but probably not quite, but outside of 10 for sure. So, he's obviously a touchdown maker down the field. So Tet could be more of that red zone threat. Maybe that could help bolster Jacksonville's offense overall.
The other thing I was going to add is with this move in particular, this could move Brian Thomas Jr. into the slot a lot more this year, which could help overall Tet and Brian Thomas Jr. a lot. But you also have to consider, like we said with Liam, the Duval curse. Is that going to be a thing the way he said it? I don't know. Is that going to jinx him? It's like the Duval. We'll have to see. But yeah, we can
so
move on
lame.
to it's
so lame. Or is it going to hold him back how weird his hiring situation was? I mean, talk about the most like bizarre thing where he like re-signs as the OC, but then like sneaks away for a second interview and then takes the Jacksonville job. That was also bizarre. But overall, the offense should run pretty well here in Jacksonville, though. And if Tet joins the fold, still worth the second pick here. Going down to number 3, we've got a quarterback, which is way higher than we put any quarterback in any of our mock drafts. So, Caleb, what do you got for us on Cam Ward?
Yeah, I think it's hard when we start talking through formatting and especially in Superflex, like where to rank quarterbacks, because in previous years, we could say that if Cam Ward was in last year's class, we're definitely not taking him at the 103. He's definitely not even at a top 4 quarterback. I think you could argue that you would take JJ, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May as prospects above Cam Ward. And so then you're going to say, well, Caleb, why are you taking him here at the 103? I think what I have learned in my time playing Dynasty fantasy football is I know nothing about quarterback evaluations. We like guys that have Konami code quarterback upside, but at the same time, these NFL franchises that spend millions and millions of dollars in scouting, they get these picks wrong pretty much every year. And that to me tells me all I need to know, that if I can be as much as I love Dynasty fantasy football and I feel like I can maybe scout a little bit of wide receiver, or I know, hey, I want a running back that has a certain BMI threshold that has also ran a 40 super fast. Like when I look at quarterbacks, I usually am like, okay, I like the college production. I like the traits, but then we always see busts, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Justin Fields, just to name a few off the top of the head that I at one time thought really highly of. But sitting here at the 103, I will take Cam Ward, goes to the Cleveland Browns, probably just means, he'll end up being a bust because he went to the Browns. But at the same time, I do prefer Cam Ward over who I ended up taking at the 104, any other QB in this class. And so I'll take Cam Ward here. Similar trajectory to a guy like a Jaden Daniels, stayed in school super long, transferred a few times. We'll have to see. Like I said, can the Browns in this post Deshaun Watson, we'll have to see how that ends up going with a buyout. In this post Deshaun Watson era, how they can build around Cam Ward with a lack of cap space. I think that'll be interesting to see, but I do think Cam Ward as a prospect getting drafted here in the top 2 picks of the NFL draft, but then getting drafted in the top 3 picks of your Superflex draft in this mock draft, I think is something that you might see happen when we come to actual rookie season.
Yeah, and they do have the weapons already in place, right? Like we know that they're in cap hell right now, but they've got strong receivers, they've got a strong tight end. So, I do appreciate this perspective a lot because I think Trevor and I kind of get tunnel vision drafting together too often, right? Where we push some of these quarterbacks down that we're not necessarily super fond of. And, myself, I've got Cam Ward number 2. I know it's not a super popular opinion, but I have Jackson Dart number 1. But, I will say, like you mentioned with the teams, they're taking him at number 2. So they're going to give him all the shots in the world. And if it hits in Superflex, like I can see where you're going.
Yeah, and, something you touched on is just not knowing quarterback evaluation super well. And guys that you can talk about, or just one guy that on this channel we talked very negatively about in the offseason last year was Bo Nix. And so, right, you go into your Superflex draft, you're like, I'm not taking Nix. He was quarterback 6. Like, I'll let somebody else like reach on him at the end of the first round. And then now he's sitting here 1 year later, like, oh, that was probably a bad call. But,
My bad.
Yeah. If Matt's even coming around on Bo Nix, that.
Not fully, but a little bit.
But there's obviously the chance that Cam Ward is good, right? He's going to kind of a dysfunctional organization. But overall, my concern about Cam Ward is he just doesn't trust his eyes. He's in the pocket. He is so quick to bail on the play if he does not get to his second read. And sometimes, he barely can get off his first read. He never gets to his third read. And I feel like that sort of stuff shows up on film consistently in the NFL. I'm just really concerned that, if the first read isn't there, or, maybe in this situation, he's got Njoku as a safety valve or Jerome Ford as a safety valve, or they draft a running back. Maybe that's kind of gets cleaned up a little bit, but that's my main concern with Cam Ward is that I just am very concerned that the processing isn't going to translate. And that's something that was not a concern with Bo Nix, right? He was like a floor play in terms of a quarterback. He was ready to play. He had played more snaps than any other quarterback in college football history. I think it was something like that. I mean, he had played a ton of snaps. So it was like,
I think Dylan Gabriel might have passed him this year.
Dylan Gabriel did pass him, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, but at the time, last year, yeah. So funny it was another Oregon quarterback, but that's my perspective on Ward. So I think we've kind of belabored him a little bit with the capital and everything. And especially if you have a quarterback need and you're at the 103, we don't blame you at all for going Ward there. Number 4, we got the other quarterback that's going to go in the top 5 picks here, Shedeur Sanders, projected first overall pick to the Titans.
Yeah, I think as we kind of talked about, I said in my last segment, like depending on where these running back, their draft capital, their performance, I definitely think there's a bunch of running backs that could get pushed up the board. That in turn is going to drop some like Shedeur and Cam Ward down. Like I said, right now it's just so hard to know. I feel like we got a deep class, but like how elite of a class do we have? I think that's really the real question. Which honestly, I'm not feeling. I don't know how both of you feel, but 2025. I didn't think 2022 was an elite level class because, of course, we didn't have any. I didn't really think any quarterbacks were going to get drafted super high. I mean, at this point in the offseason, that year we thought Malik Willis was going to be a top 5 pick. The only first round quarterback that year was Kenny Pickett, which is not going to happen this year. I mean, I really think
what an awful class, by the way.
What an awful class. But I think this class is maybe slightly better than that. But I don't think I can say that it's that much better than that. And Shedeur Sanders, like I said, sliding in here at the 104 to the Titans. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about Shedeur. Like I've heard people say, oh, there's issue, like he's a diva or things like that, which is 100% not the case at all. But if we're talking about a quarterback who likes to get sacked, that is Shedeur Sanders, 100%. And so the worry for me is he's getting drafted to the Titans team that, of course, we addressed the left tackle position last season, but we still don't have a really great offensive line. There's question marks around the weapons. I mean, you have Tony Pollard, you have Calvin Ridley, maybe Nick Westbrook-Akine can do what he did this year and score a touchdown almost every game.
Every play?
No way.
Every play. But if Shedeur Sanders is dancing back there and getting sacked, I don't think that's going to happen. So I would just say I have him here. Like I said, same line of thinking as with Cam Ward. 2 guys getting top 2 draft capital in the NFL. I got to slide him at least into my top 5 picks. in my Superflex rookie mock draft.
Yeah, and myself, like I don't hate on Shedeur because like I think he's like a diva or whatever. Like the fact that he and Dion went to Colorado like elevated that program so great, and it was great for the fans and it was great for the school and all the above. And I thoroughly enjoyed watching him play. Just to me, it's like he was 1-7 against ranked teams in those 2 years there. And it's not going to get any easier going from the Big 12 to the NFL. So while I think that he can play within a system and like I see a little bit of Brock Purdy in his game, like you're kind of feeding him to the wolves with Tennessee, like you said. So I would be very nervous to make this pick. Even if I was quarterback needy, I might be looking at a trade.
Yeah, and so on Sanders, for me, I think it's just a floor play here is what it feels like, right? He's very accurate in the intermediate and short area throws. So he's not going to necessarily be taking the top off of defenses, but somebody that can sit back there and make all of the intermediate throws and can be accurate has some value. I mean, I think maybe there's a little bit better arm strength with Tua Tagovailoa, but I feel like that's maybe more the comp I'd make in terms of being able to facilitate the offense. Isn't going to be super mobile or anything like that either. So I don't know. I just think the ceiling is capped here a lot. Obviously, again, with the high draft capital for the purposes of fantasy, you got to consider him here if you are quarterback needy. You got Aaron Rodgers as your second quarterback in your league or something. You just really need a guy. You've been kind of trying to hold on, build the rest of your roster, and you need a guy here. I don't blame you for going with Sanders. I would almost try and trade the pick if you need a quarterback at this point, right? You need go and try and get Baker with the pick or something like that in your Superflex leagues. I don't know if that's even possible, but that's kind of something that I might try and pivot from if I really do need quarterback help. Going to the 105 now, we've got Luther Burden. I'm obviously more excited about this part of the draft. I'm not a huge fan of talking about these quarterbacks because I really don't think they're going to be good. Luther Burden is somebody that I do think is going to be good going to the Dolphins here in this mock.
Yeah, I was intrigued by the fact that he went to the Dolphins. Of course, love the draft capital. At this point, are we assuming that Tyreek Hill is gone for the Dolphins and Luther Burden is sliding in as the Tyreek Hill replacement, or is it like Luther Burden sliding in as the wide receiver 3 next to Waddle and Hill, and they're just he's going to be the replacement, but eventually, I don't know. It kind of reminds me of landing spot of kind of like JSN from a few years ago, where we're like, we like him as a prospect, but the landing spot, there's just a lot of mouths to feed in front of him. But I love Luther Burden as a prospect. He's my wide receiver too. Quick, shifty. I think if we look at how Missouri used him this year, it was ridiculous. Like, just if you're going to watch this year's film, just turn it off. Go watch the last 2 years, and you're going to actually see how good Luther Burden actually is, and you're going to realize there was a malpractice in coaching. And so shout out to Luther Burden for having such an amazing freshman and sophomore season that he probably, based on everything that he did those 2 years, should have been a top 6-7 pick in the NFL draft. We should be talking about him being right after Tet McMillan, if not before Tet McMillan, but it was just coaching malpractice. So I think if you are at the 105 and maybe the two quarterbacks went /Jeanty and Tet McMillan, you should feel really good about being able to get Luther Burden here, especially if he gets top 15 draft capital.
Yeah, I mean, even if Tyreek stays this year, right, you just be patient with him. I think this is a really good play. I mean, I love Burden as well. I think that was a good point what you made about the quarterback situation. And they finally came out and they're like, oh, Brady Cook was, he was hurt all year. Like, it wasn't his fault. But yeah, he was just awful, whatever it was. So, and I talked about this before with Burden. One of the things that I've always really appreciated about him is he was, the top wide receiver prospect. He stayed home to go to Missouri. He could have transferred anywhere. He didn't. He stayed. And I think we're going to see that reflective of him being a top 15 pick in the draft.
Yeah, and overall, right, he gets like Deebo Samuel comps. He does have some rushing touchdowns in college, a lot of carries for a wide receiver. So that's why it kind of gets that comp. And then, honestly, the tape this year, it was bad, but it's because not a lot of throws down the field connected. Like, if you watch his separation down the field, you watch his downfield speed, even though he's not a complete burner, he does still have that in his game. So that still does flash. It's just not going to flash in the stats because the quarterback would either underthrow it or throw it way out of bounds. And it was honestly surprising sometimes to see how far off the quarterback was. And it's just like, okay, it's no wonder they're throwing him screens and quick slants and all that stuff constantly to just get the ball in his hands. So he did still score 8 times too, despite all of this negativity around his senior season. So he had 6 receiving and 2 rushing touchdowns this year. So it wasn't like he was a complete nothing either, right? The skills and everything else still flashed this year. It wasn't like it all went away from his breakout sophomore season. So I don't love the landing spot here if Tyreek Hill stays. I don't think Tyreek Hill is going to stay, and I think if this is the draft capital for Luther Burden and they decide to go in on a first round receiver, that's an indication that Tyreek is going to be leaving. So that would be my opinion on what Pro Football Network was thinking here with this pick. But if Tyreek stays, I don't like this at all. This is just going to be a super crowded offense. He's at best going to be third and probably going to be fourth or fifth on the offense in terms of targets. And so I think that would cap him in his first season in a way that he wouldn't be if he went somewhere like Dallas or if he went somewhere like the Bengals if they lose T. Higgins. Overall, I do think Tyreek is probably going to be on the way out for the Dolphins if they decide to make this pick. But, if he does stay, I hope they wouldn't make this pick basically if Reek is going to stay. So moving on to 106 now, we've got Emeka Egbuka. So another receiver. We got a third receiver before our second running back here. Caleb, what's the thinking there? And obviously great capital and a good team here.
Yeah, I think playing in a 3 wide receiver, half PPR format, of course, if we were playing in a full PPR format, the wide receivers get even more of a boost. But I think in my 3 wide receiver formats, I just want to make sure I can have as much depth as possible. And I think Emeka Egbuka landing here with the Cincinnati Bengals, we're assuming even if he's sliding in as the wide receiver 3, if he's taking over I know Tyler Boyd wasn't on the Bengals this year, but taking over the Tyler Boyd role next to Higgins and Jamar Chase, that is something, or Yoshi taking over the Yoshi role. I think that's going to be super valuable. And as somebody that Luther Burden and Emeka Egbuka are pretty much back-to-back in my rankings. Honestly, you guys caught me on a day where I had Luther Burden ahead of Emeka Egbuka. Today, as we're recording this, I'm thinking about it. I'm like, maybe I should put Emeka Egbuka above Luther Burden based on landing spot and based on how I feel. And you guys see the jerseys behind me. I'm a big Buckeye homer. And I think the part that people don't understand about Emeka Egbuka was he played with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Jeremiah Smith for his whole career. 2 absolutely elite level alphas. I don't care how Marvin Harrison Jr. performed in the NFL this year. Wasn't ideal. But in college, he was definitely overshadowed. But even still, this year, he still put up over 1,000 yards, still super productive. And I think he's going to test really well at the combine. I think he's going to run a lot faster than what people think. And then landing him on the Cincinnati Bengals offense with good old Joe Burrow. Yeah, just sign me up for it. Maybe it's my Ohio State homerage, giving him the lean. I love me some wide receivers over some of the running backs we're going to talk about in a bit. But I like me some Emeka Egbuka here at the 106.
I think from like a team perspective, like not a fantasy perspective, I would love to see this happen. Push Yoshi Vosh out, get this absolute elite trio of wide receivers, assuming Higgins stays. Again, this is from a team perspective, but it's like, let's just triple down on offense, baby. Our defense sucks. Let's go.
Yeah, I mean, it would obviously be fun. And this one, right, the Bengals offense, I have a lot less concerns about having 3 potential weapons here. I mean, we saw Mike Gesicki have games where he was extremely productive. We saw Yoshi Voss get a decent number of targets throughout the year. And if they have an elite weapon slotted into kind of that role and all of those targets get funneled to him, he can still be productive as a rookie. So also something you didn't mention about, even despite playing with Harrison and Jeremiah Smith, Egbuka is the all-time leading receiver now for Ohio State. So he definitely has had the production consistently throughout his college career. And if he does run faster than people think, I don't think this draft capital is all that outlandish either. I think he's going to continue to move up boards. I personally think the running backs are a little bit better in this class. So I wouldn't be taking Egbuka ahead of some of the running backs we're going to get into here next. But, again, if you need a receiver or you're leaning into the fact that it's a 3 wide receiver league, you need more depth there. I don't blame you at all for moving him up to the 6th spot. I will say, if you do have the 6th pick and you notice that a couple teams behind you are running back needy rosters, or you kind of talk to them and figure out that they're planning to pick running backs, if you're able to try and work a trade to trade back to 08 or 09 in the first round and you still get Egbuka because the running backs are going to get pushed up above him, I think that's a pretty smart thing to try and figure out if this is the player that you decide you want in the first round. Going on to 107, we've got TreVeyon Henderson. So he gets 3rd round draft capital here, but he lands with Dallas. And this is the exciting draft spot that we want to see him in. So, Caleb, what do you think on TreVeyon and the landing spot here?
Yeah, love the landing spot. Love the Cowboys landing spot. I think for me, like we said, when we start to look at these running backs, TreVeyon Henderson, if we look at what he did as a freshman at Ohio State, during that year, you would have said, okay, this is you had Bijan the year before and you're like, well, yes, or 2 years before and you're like, TreVeyon Henderson will be the next Bijan Robinson.
Yep.
Of course, we haven't seen that occur in all of his time at Ohio State. Literally as a sophomore and a junior, didn't even get to 1,000 yards rushing. Main reason that is just due to injury. We kind of saw him be a little bit more injury prone. And then, of course, this year we see him get over 1,000 yards, but he did have to play in 16 games to get it, splitting a backfield with Quinshon Judkins. But I think landing on a Dallas Cowboys offense where we have seen elite level bell cows before, I'm not out here to say that TreVeyon Henderson is going to be a 3-down workhorse. Like I said, I think he's going to have his moments to shine. Can he be used in the same way as a Jahmyr Gibbs or Devon Achane? I think those are kind of the most ideal, would be the ideal situation for TreVeyon Henderson, but he doesn't lack talent. He doesn't lack speed. In high school, he ran a 4.40, so I'm assuming that he's gotten a lot faster. If anyone watched the championship, there was a pretty good deal of burst there on the screen before the end of the second half. So I would say that we're probably looking at him testing in like the 4.38 to 4.4, like right on the dot. And if he gets that, I think it's going to be all wheels up for TreVeyon Henderson.
Yeah, man, I like the usage as a Gibbs or Achane comp. And like you said, his freshman year, I was texting my buddy. I was like, dude, I like this guy more than Bijan. And since I've changed my opinion, but I was all in on him, and I love the fact that he's healthy. And I think you're right about him not necessarily being a 3-down workhorse, but there is such a vacancy right now with Dallas with Rico Dowdle. He's a free agent. He's probably not going to come back. I think if you get some sort of like, staple bruiser type guy to maybe bring in as well, that's like not like a Kareem Hunt, but something like that can keep the chains moving, and you can keep Henderson to like 15 touches to 18 touches a game. I think he can be electric.
Yeah, and for me, I just can't get behind TreVeyon as the number 2 running back in this class. We've got so many excellent players who are literal physical monsters. Not to say that Henderson's not. Guys that I have a lot of faith can carry the early down workload and maybe get sprinkled in as a pass catcher. For Henderson, right, we saw as a sophomore, he got hurt. We saw as a junior, he got hurt. And then as a senior, they scale back his workload a ton. He did not even average 10 carries per game. So, you hear the 15 to 18 that you just mentioned, Matt, and like, that would be nice, right? If that's what he's going to be, then yeah, obviously he's going to produce at a higher level. But I just worry significantly about the workload and if he's going to be able to handle it, because it's only going to, the athletes he's going up against are only going to get bigger, stronger, faster. And so it just worries me that if he turns into more of a scat back where he's like 8 carries and 4 targets, that'll be decently valuable. But when you have Omarion Hampton, who I think could be a 20 touch per game player, Caleb Johnson, who I think could develop into a 20 touch per game player, it just worries me a little bit to put him over those 2.
I think once we get to the combine, like a lot of the combine numbers are going to change my opinions. Like if TreVeyon Henderson comes out and doesn't run a 40 that I think he's going to run, and like I said, I even admit those ankles are made of glass. Saying cool, catch me drafting him at the end of round 1, early round 2. But I think right now where I sit, and just based on the landing spot with the Cowboys, I think this is where I put him.
Yeah, and for this draft in particular, right, the landing spot says it all, because if he goes to Dallas, and we'll talk about Caleb at the end of the draft, who got picked to the Eagles in this draft, then I get it. Okay, I'm kind of on board with that too. I just worry. I just hate to pick the guy that's been injured. I guess I just got done picking Jonathan Brooks ahead of Ladd McConkey in my last rookie draft last year, and that is just still gnawing at me. It's just like I picked the guy that was injured over the guy I really liked and was healthy and on my favorite team too. Dang it! So that's just why I'm gonna take a little bit more stock in injuries moving forward, just because of that. So, anyways, let's go into the 108 now. We've got Omarion Hampton, who I alluded to earlier. I think he gets a pretty good landing spot in draft stock here. But what do you think, Caleb, on Omarion?
Yeah, no, I'm a fan of him landing here with the Bengals, and being a 6 foot, 220-pound running back, that's usually what we're looking for when we're trying to look at a guy who can get the 3-down bell cow workload. Really great prospect out of North Carolina. I think landing on the Bengals, the part for me where I was trying to evaluate is, okay, if he gets this type of draft capital, Chase Brown's days are clearly numbered. But Chase Brown also wasn't an inefficient or lacking any sort of fantasy football value last year. So I think, of course, year 1, they'll probably split carries. We're probably looking at a year 2, Omarion Hampton absolutely knocking Chase Brown back to being a backup scat back type. But I feel very good with him at the 108. But I know, like I said, it was super close between him and TreVeyon Henderson, the way that I was going to go here.
I haven't drafted any Chase Brown in pre-draft best ball because I am petrified that someone like this is going to come in and again, sticking with the theme of Cincinnati just saying screw defense and taking their first 2 picks.
Yeah, let's put that in this mock.
They just hired a new defensive coordinator. They're like, sorry, bud, figure it out. We're going offense.
Hey, Matt, will you come play safety for us this year?
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, seriously. Just leaning into like top 3 at their positions, both in both the first and the second round. But with me though, Chase Brown, I mean, he showed early in the year even that he could be decently productive with Zach Moss on the field, right? And I think with Omarion Hampton, right, Zach Moss is a little bit better pass catcher than anybody ever gives him credit for. And so I think there's an opportunity here for Chase Brown to move back into that 5 to 8 rushes and 5 to 7 target realm, because that's kind of how much they targeted the running back last year. And Hampton can move into the early down role and kind of see that 15 carry, maybe 1 or 2 targets per game type of role in this offense. And so that's, I think, as a rookie, getting that kind of established role as a rusher and then growing as a pass catcher, growing into the lead role, potentially growing into a 3-down back. That's what I want to try and get in terms of running backs in a rookie draft. So that's why I really like Hampton. I would love this draft spot because obviously the offense is going to be humming, and it's not going to be because of the running back either, right? I mean, he's going to see so many 6-7 man boxes, hardly ever going to see an 8-man front, maybe on short yardage situations, and that's it. So I really would like Hampton in this system. He's gonna have the opportunity to make 1-cut rushes all the time, and that's what we said in our short about him, is if he gets into a system where he can just hit the hole and go, that's the ideal situation for him. So I really love the landing spot here with the Bengals. Moving on to 109, we've got Quinshon Judkins going to the Raiders in the 3rd round.
Yeah, I think I'm just on like a little bit of a Buckeye roll here. We had 3 Buckeyes out of like the last 4. I mean, maybe there's a little bit of bias involved. I mean, you guys can decide as you're listening, but Quinshon Judkins, I think a lot of people are going to discount this year because of the lack of production with him going to Ohio State and sharing the backfield with TreVeyon Henderson. I mean, I think the same way that I'm looking at Luther Burden is the same way that I'm looking at Quinshon Judkins. Like if you look at his first 2 years at Ole Miss, like, dude, as a freshman, broke Herschel Walker's SEC record. Like, that is big boy status. And to now see, kind of like we said, like it wasn't a terrible year for Quinshon Judkins, but when there was so many different weapons in this Ohio State offense between TreVeyon Henderson, Emeka Egbuka, Jeremiah Smith, also Will Howard stealing rushing touchdowns at the goal line, like there was a lot of things that I think it showed Quinshon Judkins as a teammate. I think there was a lot of people that said that there was a lot of attitude problems, that he needed and demanded the ball from Ole Miss, and that it really wore him down towards the end of the season. I think this year it really showed Quinshon Judkins as a teammate, which I think is important for his overall dynasty fantasy football value. Landing him here on a team like the Raiders, who were literally rolling out Sincere McCormick at the end of the season. And we were all happy in our fantasy football championships if you were super depleted at running back to start him. Shout out Quinshon Judkins moves in. Hopefully they have a quarterback, but it doesn't even matter because I think Quinshon Judkins is the type of guy that can definitely give you 15 to 20 touches a game and be super productive.
Yeah, and one of the things that I really love about the expanded playoff in college football this year is guys like Quinshon Judkins, like they have a very strong finish in front of a national audience, and they can really move up the board. And I would expect Judkins to continue to climb during the combine. So I love this spot too.
Yeah, and obviously, they're going to clear house at running back and give it over to him if they do end up taking him, right? I think that's the big thing here. And, I've seen people start even comparing him to like Alvin Kamara in terms of being able to catch the ball in the backfield, even though that was Henderson's role, right? He's going to run decently slow. I think, he's not going to be a 4.3. He's not a threat to run in the 4.3s. Yeah. Maybe he scratches the high 4.4s, but I would expect probably 4.5 speed here from Judkins. He's not going to be a burner, but he is very strong with the ball. And the other thing I do like about him in terms of growth potential is he's still super young. He's a young junior coming out, and I think there's a chance that he could just be good for a long time too. I mean, you look at him as a rookie coming out at 21 years old versus like Tyrone Tracy coming out and being 24. It's just like, Tracy was getting picked maybe a little bit further down the boards in rookie drafts than this, but Judkins is somebody that I think can even continue to grow into a more complete player in the passing game. So, in the third round, I think is interesting too, because I've started to hear buzz that he might go in the first round, go in the top 25 picks maybe, and might even jump over Omarion Hampton and Caleb Johnson in terms of draft capital. And so if that happens, I think we're going to be having a different conversation around him and TreVeyon Henderson even too, because if he does sneak into the first round, it's going to be really hard not to move him up to at least number 3 in the class, behind Omarion Hampton. All right, getting into 110 now. We've got our first tight end, Tyler Warren, first round capital to the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, when I made and I sent this yesterday, I honestly, I play in a lot of some tight end premium leagues, so I always lean a little bit of late round tight end here. Now, we don't have any type of premium, so this is your standard half PPR. But Tyler Warren, to me, as a tight end prospect, he's not Brock Bowers. He's not a Kyle Pitts level prospect, but he's really darn close. He's super on there. Like, he reminds me so much of a guy like a Trey McBride, who I love. I was sad to see him not go to the Colts, because I would love him to land on the Colts and wear number 44. Because he literally reminds me of Dallas Clark so much. If any of you guys who tune into the channel remember Dallas Clark, absolute legend for the Indianapolis Colts. But landing here with the Broncos, I think he would be exactly who I always prayed Greg Dulcich to be, which we never saw that full potential ever happen over the last 3 seasons. But I think Tyler Warren being able to come in, be able to play with Bo Nix in an offense where, yeah, you have Cortland Sutton, Troy Franklin, Marvin Mims, but there is an opening for somebody who is a super elite level pass catcher to come in. 6'6", put up over 104 catches this year. So I do love me some Tyler Warren here at the 110.
Yeah, and Sean Payton, tight end's been a black hole the last 2 years on the Broncos. So I think this is just a perfect fit.
Yeah, I love this spot. I'm actually surprised to hear that you'd rather him land on the Colts than on the Broncos. We've been pushing him down because we've seen him mocked to the Colts, and we've just discussed with Anthony Richardson and with how many weapons they have on that team, it's just going to get muddied in a way that I don't necessarily think it will if he goes to the Broncos. I feel like if they draft him here, the moment he steps on the field, he's the number 2 target on the team. And I think that would help him in fantasy a ton in his first year, especially with Bo Nix going into his second year, adding this level of weapon. I would be much more inclined to draft Tyler Warren. We were even getting comments saying, like, dude, you're going to pick Colston Loveland ahead of Tyler Warren, and it's like, well, I mean, the landing spot of the Chargers just feels better. It feels like Colston could step in and be that second option right away. But if Warren is going to step into a similar situation, I think Matt and I both prefer Warren as a prospect. So I like this landing spot a lot. I wouldn't blame you if you need a tight end, or if you wanted to take a tight end prospect, just moving him up into the 7-6 range, even with this draft spot. I wouldn't mind that at all. I mean, I think if you had said that about Brock Bowers last year, you might have met with some resistance, but you're looking at it now and it's like, okay, maybe not so much. So I wouldn't be surprised if we look up at the end of the year and we're saying, okay, Tyler Warren now is tight end 3 for Dynasty purposes. I mean, you look at the top 5 at Dynasty tight end, and it's like literally it goes to Laporta at 3, Hawkinson at 4, and like Njoku at 5. Like I just feel like for Dynasty purposes, there is just nothing there at tight end. So, again, if you want to get in on the position, if you're weak or you have Kelsey, you've been relying on Kelsey and you have a late first round pick and he's there, this is the perfect player, assuming he lands in a draft spot like the Broncos to go after in your rookie drafts. Going on to the 111 now, we've got Jalen Milroe. So Caleb, what do you got for us on him? We're going to dunk on you a little bit on this one. Neither of us like Milroe that much.
So I'll be clear. I picked Milroe, and then last night I'm laying in bed, and yesterday was the first day of the Shrine Bowl.
Having anxiety about getting roasted.
I'm literally like scrolling Twitter, and there's like all of a sudden like Jalen Milroe struggles today, and I like click on it, and it's like just a highlight tape of literally all of these passes going into the ground, and I'm like, listen, I had already submitted this. I was like, I'm gonna eat this tomorrow when it comes. I said, you know what, this is terrible. But no, Jalen Milroe. Do I think he's gonna go round 2 after the performance he just put up the last 2 days? I don't know. We'll see. We'll have to see. I think there are a ton of quarterback needy teams. I think Jalen Milroe has everything that you could want when we're talking through strength, when we're talking through his quick twitch and how fast he is. But is he more of a running back playing quarterback? I don't know after what I've been seeing towards the end of the season. He did take some steps this year in regards to just his overall passing. I say steps because he wasn't great the year before. But yeah, I guess landing on the Giants, can he be better than Drew Lock? I guess. I hope. I pray for Malik Neighbors. I got a lot of Malik Neighbors shares. As long as he throws at 180 targets over there, he should be fine. It doesn't really matter how good they are because Malik Neighbors will catch it. But I think at this point, I leaned that way. I think when we talk, there's a clear top two quarterbacks, however we want to view that, if they're going to be good or not. But then I think this tier two of like a Jalen Milroe and a Jackson Dart, a lot of it's going to be landing spot dependent. And I just felt comfortable pulling the trigger because he was an early second round pick.
You didn't look at his hand size before either. Apparently, that's a big issue these days.
His hand size is smaller than mine. I've got 9-inch hands. This is like 8.5.
I'm just not a big Milroe guy. I mean, he took like 45 sacks 2 years ago. I'm like, it's just not sustainable in the NFL. And I can make excuses and say he's got all the tools, but I think one thing that's actually hurting him a little bit more is like the fact that he's so good deep and so bad in short and intermediate. People are like, "Oh, Anthony Richardson." Oh, thank you. Yeah. So
that is exactly what I was going to say.
There's no hiding now.
No, it's like people were all gung ho. They were saying, "Let's take the raw prospect. He's the most athletic quarterback that we've ever tested at the combine," but we forgot that he literally will complete a higher percentage of his passes 20 yards down the field than he will behind the line of scrimmage. So, it's just I struggle so much with Jalen Milroe. And if he does get this capital, he's going to get drafted in rookie drafts pretty high, so we'll see if he is able to maintain his capital through the combine, but obviously the Senior Bowl is going to hurt his capital a lot.
The one thing I wanted to add is I blame Lamar Jackson for what's about to happen with Jalen Milroe because we all got burned. We weren't talking about Lamar like this when he got drafted late to the Baltimore Ravens, and then he did what he did, and then now every quarterback that looks like Lamar Jackson, that's super athletic, that can run, everyone just gets excited for. That's who I'm blaming for this pick at the 111. So Lamar Jackson, you are the issue with Jalen Milroe throwing the ball into the ground this week, but it'll be fine.
Yeah, I tell you what about Lamar Jackson. He was not a good passer when he took over as a rookie. I know they made it to the playoffs and lost to the Chargers in the playoffs, but he was not a good passer. And then he was not really that good of a passer his second year either. And then it was like his third year, it was like, oh, you're going to throw for 400 yards and 5 touchdowns on the Dolphins in week 1? Like, is that what's going to happen here? Like, who is that? And then all of a sudden it's like he didn't quite put it together for the full season in terms of passing, but there were glimpses throughout that third season. And so, I really think that Lamar developed. So if they give Milroe a shot and he starts to show any sort of flashes as a passer, we'll eat our words here, but watching him skip 10-yard dig routes is just not something I'm interested in at this point in the process.
Lamar also won the Heisman too, so
that's true. Yeah. It wasn't like he was some unknown. He was literally the best player. Yeah. So they traded up to get him too in the first round. So we'll see where Milroe ends up. But
if you're watching this is like the LeBron, like the Dwayne or the alley oop, and I was just there, like just ready. I just caught it. I caught it at the wrong time.
To be like a champ, you could have edited your picks, but no, this was a good discussion.
I sent it and I said, like I said, I'm laying in bed last night. I'm like, you know what? We're eating this tomorrow. It's okay. We come back. We'll live another day. That's the best part of the process, though.
Yeah, and I blame the mock drafters for continuing to put him up this high. I want somebody in the mock drafts to have the guts to show Travis Hunter to the Giants, and then in the second round, Jackson Dart. Because how fun would it be to have Malik Neighbors, Travis Hunter, and Jackson Dart just throwing bombs to them down the sidelines? And then the screen passes, right? Electric down the field players and good after the catch players. I think that would be an insanely fun offense. So I hope to see some mocks do that here in the near future. Or Dart might work his way into the early first round, but I don't know. Not at this point that he's going after Milroe and Mox. So that's what I'd like to see happen. So that was my way of transitioning into our last pick here. At the 112, we've got Travis Hunter going to the Patriots at the 4th overall pick.
Yeah, and this is one where all of us are going to be talking about for the next few months. Is Travis Hunter going to be a full-time wide receiver? Is he going to play cornerback? And everyone's going to be debating this back and forth. And I think here in the actual draft board, they have him slotted in as a cornerback. And I think a lot of people are assuming that he's going to play a lot more corner than he plays wide receiver. I just think all the money in the NFL right now, we're not paying cornerbacks. I mean, we pay elite cornerbacks what they're worth, but all the money is with wide receivers. So I think if Travis Hunter wants to make a ton of money, he's probably going to play a lot more wide receiver than cornerback. Now, what are those splits going to look like? I don't know. But I know that if Travis Hunter was only going to the NFL as a wide receiver, we're probably talking about him being in the top 4 to top 3 of your Dynasty rookie draft. And so just being able to take a shot at him at the 112, you probably won your chip if you're sitting there at the 112. So I'll take the upside shot on Travis Hunter in the fact that he is going to play primarily wide receiver.
Yeah, I'm starting to change my tune quite a bit. I think it's going to be much closer to full-time wide receiver. And I'm thinking, I don't want to take anything away from him as like a cornerback, but I'm thinking like just maybe the fact that his ball skills are so elite led to him being such an elite cornerback and all those picks. But again, I hope he plays wide receiver, because as much as I love watching lockdown corners, you don't really get to watch them because they're locking down the other guy. So we'll see what happens. But you're right. Like if you're drafting before we really know, it's going to be a potential lotto ticket this late.
I definitely am of the mind that whoever drafts him is at least going to give him a shot as a rookie to play both ways. So I don't think there's a lot of people that have been saying, look, we're going to know by the draft, or you're going to know by your rookie drafts. And I'm of the mind that that's not going to be the case. I think that especially if he lands in New England, it's not like he's got a ton of competition at wide receiver. He can still play 60% of the snaps on offense and have a ton of manufactured touches in that 60% snap window, and then also be a full-time player on defense. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how he transitions and how the team that drafts him lets him play, because I fully expect, though, in that first year anyways, that he's going to be splitting time. Now, after that, I think it's going to be a little bit difficult to know after that if he's going to start to slide one way or the other, right? If he grades out as a top 5 corner immediately, and he's being talked about with Surtain and Ramsey and Sauce Gardner, he's not going to lose the shine in terms of being a celebrity or being in the media. And then if he's dominating on offense, and he's not maybe doing so well on defense, or didn't ascend into that top 5 right away, like people kind of expect, then maybe he expands his role on offense and gets kind of phased down on defense. So, but I do think that that's going to take at least a year for us to know here with Hunter. So again, I like Caleb's perspective on this of just saying, look, if you won your chip and he's still there, take a shot on him, because you're adding somebody who's extremely talented to your likely already talented roster. And if it works out, you're getting an early first round pick at the end of your first round. So I like taking a shot there if you have an absolutely loaded roster. All right. And with that, thank you guys so much for watching. Caleb, thank you for joining us. It was super fun to have you on, and we look forward to talking to all of you guys in the next one.
Later, guys. Thanks, Caleb.
Thanks for having me.